Hello, Americans. It's different if a president says something negative about another candidate without explaining, without using than if the people do, because there are exceptions relative to the uses of the candidates' names in the politics, the difference of politics. This breaching method measures and maintains that the difference between peop- between why mandated law is not followed. Other things, others ourselves to blame. Where many ways. It's because a singular breaching method and roles with it that it's sustained only allowed. Fathom. And then America's founders were born. And the design of the suburbs was for this, with slavery entrenched North and South America. And that was not clear, and is not clear because not because people didn't do their homework, because this breaching method commonly, non-distinctly has also distinctly campuses A through Z, with criminally foreign influence, fact, treatment, nature, quality aspects, and natures of convictions, and pretending it's opinion when when others recorded then has been pretended through their databases from off their campuses too. Ugh. They're speaking about misinformation. So in other words, there's a certain type of victim slash hyper victim as people who aren't formal law. Like, in other words, people A through Z. This breach made criminal enterprises, private ones, insidiousness of A through Z, all communications locations, news locations, the difference of that used, the same one that used black people's rights of life, communicate other than nature does. With the breaching method and no one allowed to mention it, still, our founders communicated for us to communicate about this when we got the chance to. Now we have the chance, but still, identities and differences are being have been used tactical terror from what can be defended and ourselves from remote uses of those differences. Rights to lie because we have all these countries shared here and there. They already had collusion. There are people from, and then they take it personal because that's the method. They have people use their names or not, and they just keep putting the acting as collusions with the people from off the locations, sticking fake things. And then it did and does have ties to all natures of crimes as we know them, and even the killers and names next to the bodies using that to throw other things on there and collusions. There's a quality of fact treatment nature once it's too late, especially with regarding murders and the child abusers and people where they have types of counters with those locations where our collusion slash S, like hospitals with the mental health power. They have recorded roles with all organized crime bodies, plural, private ones, and uses of that not just there but at other locations because it was and is used remotely leading up to the World Trade Center attack in that context and sense. The family members, all natures of conjunctions to everyone relative to roles with this originally instilled. Like, for example, roles with blaming other things, others ourselves for things our founders communicated for us to bring on a breaching method, a human fact treatment nature breaching method. Some kids tried to communicate this when they were kids, and they were sensed by the kids of overt criminal enterprises, private ones at the same time with the interbranching collusion with each other. Because any kid who was who would think about it this way, they have to keep kids not aware of that breaching method which has been sustained against Native Americans and have it voiced as it is a name of the human species volume science, the species of individual bodies, of the individual species body, with group difference slash S generated from that difference, which shows up, which we could discern is not our identity, is not the other species' bodies, but it is anyway to an extent. And we could discern there is another, this other. We are simultaneously with it, but not as it. So it is simultaneous nature, but it is also a hyper additional, a hyper simultaneous nature. And there are proofs that this is how the ancients first agreed. Before the sciences and everything became currently foreign influenced, humanity helped liberate ourselves from, there are proofs from dinosaurs and other threats where we were the prey. In other words, we could have even been cultivated for the nature of our fragility to begin. But also, there are proofs that this breaching method replaced how nature communicates as best it could and force that sustained. To leave the hyperforensic trail, so to speak, of itself, to keep it for how they did, we observe this, having been consciously maintained. Roles, needs in nature, blaming also use slash S of other things, others ourselves, being and having been blamed for things our founders really communicated, to blame on the human factory nature breaching method. So when people want to have a nature debate, in other words, people are reporting on serious issues and they're making opinions against things like that about debatable. And they're lying, in other words, they're using sources where they have rights to lie used where they don't have the right to lie. But that's associated with readings of statutes of precedence predators, only capable of being per the uses of the science's abridgments originally instilled. We have what is very easy to learn, obfuscated while simultaneously there are other natures of organized crimes, roles, that and methods of them that are mass. It's, for example, even with black people's rights of eyes, deny the significance of this being simultaneously with subject treatments regarding laws with that were entrenched before America's founders were born and after their births with slavery. They communicate for us to explain how the breaching method measured and maintained everyone fact treating nature enslaved, therefore physically. We're supposed to be honest about the extortion of George Washington too, which would have brought up. We're supposed to be honest, first of all, about how our founders, before the Declaration of Independence, before the Constitutional Convention, our founders behind James Madison's plan figured out there was no way. It was only the way to hope for us to communicate with us this way and for us to finish it. Fact should be nature alone. But we have to take possession of our name, not from other countries, from the hyper foreign. We are all stuck in the countries together. We have to be speaking this truth together and simultaneously with our disputes. Now, there's a difference between, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump have different strengths. Just like someone, in other words, for example, with the economy, other countries, A through Z, have locations, areas, and states that speak about economies and spoke about economies and value nature systems through and as systems A through Z, tactically ulterior from the one that is this one again that uses the hyper simultaneous being distinct from the simultaneous is distinct as a identity of hyper invisible but still discernible. That is conjunction with these invisible but still discernible parts of English grammar. In all parts of English, the letters and numbers are juxtaposed. Now one has rows. Sub rows are deep. The seed is even deeper than the fake branches. Fulls at A through Z. That's countries A through Z. We are in a semi-ancient trap with names that uses names because it's exploitation of how the human volume science works, the human value/value progression, this hyper invisible nature that we must appreciate. Vaccines. I teach us things, but long. The species body longs to shadow box. Some rest, I tell best. So, in other words, a little kid in New York City, and then they do how they try to adapt. But how can you adapt if you're entertaining science is abridged? Science, the Constitution unabridged, and the value of having an amendment that says we have rights that are too numerous to list. This breaching method showed the certain type of victim/hyper victim only allowed to speak for the law or not, to have the roles with itself uses of the differences too, because it contains the nature of debate. With the nature of debate contains quality aspects of nature that can't defend themselves and afford the quality of fact-keeping nature necessary to counter properly the real causes of the worst negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures at all locations, areas, and states. Like things from fentanyl, even if it's made up, in other words. If it's not made up, and the nuclear, just the nuclear alone. And there's proofs that there is secrecies forced by nuclear, including peaceful means, that A through Z don't have the means. You can't entertain how they entertain, learning about life and speaking about positive and negative, and responding to instances. There are little magic tricks that are being stacked upon each other for a method that maintained predicate acts with facts, methods, roles, needs, and nature self-valued. There are these means to discern it easily regarding how the breaching method is a scientific value left out, while simultaneously the how we have black people's whites of eyes is left out. There are ciphers like how there is president/chief and how they are distinct that come with phrases we know, like the famous sentence we know, like "Don't shoot until you see the whites of eyes." It's also inseparable from where, and how Native Americans had to fight with Native Americans, and they had to be part of our founders too. But we're supposed to recognize that also as the face of James Madison, so we could show, in other words, that we have their communications, all of them, replaced. And how they said it that way enables us to discern that then and now, and how it was and is gotten away with, which shows further victim/hyper victim. But and the predator with the motivations narrative, that's another predator part no one realizes. It's because of how you guys were taught to speak for the law and the sciences and the nature of debate. It contains quality aspects in nature that can't defend itself, as styles that can't defend themselves. Regardless, they like each other, disagree, know each other, though they're not the whole array is being used to sense, or they sense all exceptions, even if it is everyone, even if it is in majority people. Well, like with black people's white eyes, most people would have we would have realized, we would have sorted out, blew all the dust off, all the criminal insidiousness out of the conjunctions between as the sciences, only appearing to be distinct because of how they are in generation of more hyper additional nature, which is what we are observing when we observe how nature's identity is bound 5 ways distinctly from how 3. Again, like those 3 parts of time, past, now active, we know to an extent is true always. And just the value of the seasons, even if they don't come, because the nuclear and everyone's state systems act will ulterior from nature's hypernative pure. Hypernative nature shows us the value of the difference between president slash chief and the difference of the means to disagree with anyone. In other words, even if someone has is nasty, there's a difference between being nasty against the president or something like that because you don't like him. There's a difference between that and being that. In other words, the people that are judging such have state collusions with a method slash S. And everyone's guilty at the same time. But to discern it, you have to allow someone free speech to demonstrate that there is an identity theft, fraud, slander method, and there is another name. There are other names involved. This is a method that makes people go, oh, this person said this person said that. It makes them actually say things, including behavior and with me for ways they like and ways they don't like. Not just because they're legitimately being used by investigators. Simultaneously, too, it is the difference between that and the rules with overt criminal enterprise, private ones, all these different countries off campuses. There are syntax in campuses that between me, my name, and I forgot his name. But when I was in an algebra class, and there was I don't know the guy's last name. He has the name John. FBI Director Luskin and other agencies have criminally foreign influence uses roles with security. So I don't want to quote a guy when they make it not nasty. We're in other words, we're supposed to use science. You're not supposed to use allegations, not just allegations, so people could defend themselves, because the courts never stop being collusions with predicate acts with facts methods and uses of them at other locations, where they have to try to do their best to speak for law, where the speeching method made them incapable of that, because the names at those locations had originally instilled collusion slash S, even with the difference between when and how, with all natures of all sides of criminal and civil cases, all sides of crime scenes, not by accident. This breaching method was perfected this from some ancient times since before modern religions. This is also relative to how the beginning of the Old Testament says only defend this part of this right here, this part right here, and the part that comes before it. This part right here with the names of the people of the sciences will come together in the part before it, which is about the quality diffusion that we could discern. Is its identity, is the science of valuing the simultaneously equally valuable and increasingly of the extent of its identity that we could discern as itself true always, like those 3 parts of time that come also with the other 2, and quality diffusion where there is a trinity that way too. But it's per how it shows us too. To answer a question without explaining it fully yet, it is functional how it is a distinct identity of hyper-invisible, not just a distinct identity of simultaneous nature. It is why, for example, we need 5 words for the verb rather than just 1 word for a verb. It is why and how we can only grapple with subjects individually grouped. I know I'm trying to say it that way. But in other words, it's why subjects individually grouped and together the relativity of that, like volume sciences is as that. Three volume sciences has a distinct identity of volume. That is the identity of hypersimultaneous singular. And they're at the same time, it wants and needs us to have different names for it because we're supposed to be led by it. That means you have to talk about it honestly. And part of it shows us, and that's part of the way it shows us. In other words, there's a whole bunch of reasons that nature's showing us that can be proved. That we're supposed to appreciate how there's a distinct identity of hyper invisible but still discernible. And why? And that's what it comes down to. The extent of what is true always, not denying the slightest exceptions, not denying sequence shift, not denying other people valuing those truths, that truth or other truths lose for life with as the value of convictions. So in other words, or theory, we have the identity of nature itself shows us that we want to appreciate and discern that which was behind what hurt the Native Americans, sickly distinctly from the colonists, sickly distinctly from the people at the other end of the colonists, which was not only England, too. All those countries were in the same sickly, non-distinctly north and south. James Madison's plan involved calling attack upon himself, not just England as himself a representative, but also but against the human species body. That's where the Constitution, unabridged, with the rights that are too numerous for us to list. We don't play games with fishing and already having fished and pretending they could speak for the law anyway. Predicate acts of facts, federal evidences, crimes, racketeering acts in nature's worse than war crimes at locations A through Z. The same people speaking about crime because they were backed into, through their life. This used all natures of difference were used as the breaching method employed uses of them. To knowing that the impositions would cause countries to try to become groupings of humanity. But it knew it could play them and that because it has locations, areas, and states entertain criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, collusion/S with all kinds of natures of organized crimes, methods, and motivations, and predicate acts with facts, methods, and motivations roles. Like behavior racketeering itself is involved here, which really plays the world's worst, keeping streams of people going into courts each day. Increasingly, Connecticut's judicial branch offices and corrections offices are recorded having been used remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions since founding. Forgiveness is this because this goes with making peace and making hyper peace. Because peace can be criminal and serious nature of peace, as we know, as we can observe, as it has been stated. Not naturally, but nature as criminal insidiousness, and rolls with its self-value and with use/s of it, self-value. That's why and how we can't get a response from the news that's involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders. They're involved with people that have been planting evidences at campuses and with the family members of child abusers, leaders of kids. Then and further, more leaders of the kids at the same time. They're making more and more people guilty so they could stay collusions with all kinds of natures of organized crimes that were brought up at once. They have rules with untimely deaths and other natures of organized crime. Like, I mean, well, other natures of crimes, rules with guns and violence and uses of places like where you can get forced for mental evaluation, where you force people verbally to call the police. You know what they do? They plant when people try to use their voice to overcome people using weapons and planting evidences and doing things that you know that can be overcome with voices. They jump in and say collusions and they lie about their motivations. They have wire crime acts and methods with Wethersfield Police, people involved with Fox Connecticut News and WFSB and WTNH, also with different owners through different businesses per use of location slash S rolls. That's only just stuff juxtaposing the difference between that is also used. These are uses of corners of streets and corners of buildings and exceptions consciously in ways even they missed, except for they could hear me now. That's why you have to follow mandated law on time. Before the World Trade Center attack and every year since, with Hartford courts, New Britain Superior Court, and Connecticut's District Court people, I didn't know it was them yet, and the FBI director, Robert Luskin, and co-defendants of his, John LeConte, Thaddeus Grabowski. Thaddeus Grabowski is also one of the ones with a whole bunch of people next to Fox Connecticut News, with police and courts planting evidences with the news people and collusions even preemptively. They're at this food location. They're planting evidences, collusions. Their roles with uses of locations, all sides of criminal and civil cases, the lawyers, their family members, their sources. The same thing with the courts and the exception people on off the state judicial branch, state corrections offices. They're used remotely, needing to hide live progressions for a method that showed them needs to pretend for other motivations too, and increasingly until they have real ones, and it propagated that. So in other words, this is recorded, but we have to appreciate it. It's going to show how our agencies and courts and all sides of cases had collusions. So at least there is a means to show a better way to correct everyone at once without prisons. And or there is a misprision slash hyper misprision. Whereas also, some people times in some of the cases, there's definitely people that are involved with the prison system that deserve to be in there more than the people in there. Also, per their uses of collusions at crime scenes like next to body dumping spots, and with uses of the killer sins too, to keep their mouth shut about what was actually used those locations, because the people involved with it don't understand. I don't even know all their names. In other words, it's all the identities of the law and all the counters to it, except all exceptions. They sense that even if it's a majority of people, even where and how it's everyone, and it adapts. Same thing at the other countries. It keeps criminal foreign influences blamed for right where and how we should blame hyper criminal foreign influences. And or if someone want to debate, don't leave out the collusions with names on all sides of cases, because there are means to discern that. And the news, and they're lying about they've been using right to lie for reasons they don't have the right to lie, because there were different cultures juxtaposed here along roads and routes since before our founders were born, before those roads were even made. This is playing our value progression relative to the founding spots. Still use roles with predicate acts with fax methods, mail crime methods, wire crime methods, and with the Wethersfield police in the courts with the same houses, like on Church Street in Old Wethersfield, involved with WTNH. Also along Route 175 with and corners of streets next to schools planting predicate acts, and on the campuses too with WFSB, and then pretending it's personal. In other words, to maintain roles, to leave things in legal people's hands who have recorded criminally foreign influence uses of that with a whole bunch of different countries. That's one of the reasons they're leaking now through me. We're going to talk more and more about how the different countries and cultures who are involved with the people who've been sticking fake things from other classrooms and spreading lies to leaders of the schools of the kids about others they never even had conversations with, etc. Abuses of their own kids too. Ugh. So it has something to do with their roles all along Route 3, intercities, and with a Mr. Neville and their roles interstates with state police, Vermont, Maine, Rhode Island, and with people with the name Violet involved with the organized crime groups, legitimately or not, like undercover or not. And even if that's juxtaposed and there's some kind of righteous counter to it. In other words, where there is an extent of righteous counter to criminal enterprises and transnational gangs, they still have collusions with it. They're recorded at corners of buildings and campuses, planting evidences as names involved with World Trade Center predicate acts. As in other words, there's a Joshua Stryker and a whole bunch of people at UPS recorded capacity demonstrated confirmed before and after the World Trade Center attack. They've been roles with stacking predicate acts, fake ties to people on and off campuses, like Trinity College. With a Dean Alford, and a Dean Judd is also involved with some untimely deaths and child offenders with his kids that the FBI director and courts influenced as their roles with overt criminal enterprises and child abusers forced, and the counters had roles with it. In other words, they also putting fake audio and video transcripts to pretend fake things and evidences and have others discover it fake, where they keep remote uses, criminally foreign influence of all natures of investigators. Quinnipiac University is also increasingly leaking roles with the prosecutors and judges who have been planting evidences on and off campuses and between them. Also, medical, sexual, overt criminal enterprise, identity theft, fraud, slanders, also black KKK themed and interreligious themed, and uses of their kids for identity thefts and frauds against others, people with the databases tied to themselves, including strangers, going out of their way to make it look and lie about their motivations. That's how and why we're going to examine all these. And two, there are exceptions because it's not clear there are Koreans associated with people named Demora, and they said that the Koreans are the ones that knew my name and wanted to talk to me. Also, a Daryl Chandler did, who's also one of the ones recorded involved with federal evidences crimes with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and other foreign countries and criminal enterprises involved with all kinds of natures abuses of grammar school kids and middle school kids, attaching the fake ties, fake natures of ties to other people, criminally for and fake motivations for it. Increasingly, these are people involved with writing forensics, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, federal evidences, crime, wire crime, mail crimes, and Wethersfield police falsified police reports rolls with them, and various natures of courts, and people involved with them personally and professionally with overt criminal enterprises and untimely deaths, timed uses of it rolls. Even if any or all that is made up, they have recorded federal evidence, got a whole wire crime acts and methods and fake ties to kids, foreign and domestic, that Wethersfield police have in Newington police families and Rocky Hill police families with the same house /S. So they also have the managers of Stop and Shop. Since before it was Stop and Shop, though, its use of the location on Town Line Drive, involved with people with the name Smith, David Smith, and their mother. David Smith, their mother, and Jamie Smith, were involved with managers there and fire departments. Involved with people that know my name, I don't know their name. They all run in with fire departments and foreign families to hide life progressions and fake conversations with people roles. And then from there, Hartford Hospital has a whole bunch of people involved with federal crimes on my street with a whole bunch of names. And they also did fake conversations with me. In that fake conversations here, we're going to read this. They pretended that I said that everyone was evil. They pretend all these things, all these people tied to the same house, like Colello, involved with this Phil Colello, also with Whiting Forensics, with the Bob Chase confessions, brought up a Phil Colello, who's been since then still further involved with the principal child offender and the things that brought it up to me, with a Robert Rodriguez, who's also involved with state police interstates, with a Robert um, Mike Roberts, who I never had a class with. Yeah, educators involved with federal crime, criminally formed child abuses, elderly abuses, same families at the same time, the same ones that have roles with untimely deaths at Trinity College, as the ones that made confessions on my street to make it look like I knew people. And they're putting me out like because I caught them before the World Trade Center attack. I didn't know it was judges, prosecutors, and all that involved. They were planting evidences and who request to help for me. It's also names on all sides of criminal and civil cases and uses of depositions and the difference, like with the depositions of former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and his co-defendants. They're involved with federal evidences crimes and against me with Harper Court's family members and New Britain's Superior Court's family members against me and others. But I'm only complaining about myself. And they have also been changing me to fake conversations, fake communications with me and everyone around me since I was a kid. The same ones involved with it. And with the name Scalora, increasingly involved with confessions from strangers, Wethersfield police. I never saw, there's a Scalora associated with a Mike, Fred Grisey, who's one of the ones who was a kid who just started making confessions to me from other areas and roles with, I found out with this O'Brien family that used to live up the street, and a Cololo family with different police departments involved with planting evidences, also with other agencies in foreign and domestic military, as roles leading up to the World Trade Center attack in that context and since, and as roles with remote uses of names next to the state corrections offices and next to the state judicial branch offices, where how the military is recorded how used remotely criminally foreign influence and self-valuing that. In other words, this I was there 3 days. They had fake conversations. They forged doctors' names, a Dr. Shamsi Ali. So the FBI has rules with a whole bunch of different countries and criminal enterprises next to that location too. The girl reported dragged to her death, even if she wasn't. She has recorded ties to Mike Violet, Mark Violet, and they said there's an Andrea Violet. I never had a conversation with her in my life, and it has something to do with their roles all along Route 3 and its conjunctions with foreign and domestic military and their roles next to the state capitol, increasingly with this O'Brien family and their neighbors, with identity theft, fraud, slanders, with the names here, with the foreign bodies. And they make he said, she said, and they duck their names out. Not just Koreans, Italians, um, Russians, Ukraine. And then they pretend it's personal. That's how they keep sick natures at A through Z. They pretend one side has integrity. Which side has integrity? Not one. Boxing is fun. So you guys have our founders' words changed. You have the value of homework assigned to replace what their obligations were to teach. So in other words, I want a response too for the rest of what I recorded. What they know I'm aware is actually recorded. And if she doesn't want to get in a lot more in trouble, I want the names who influenced Michelle Sandquist, whatever her name is now. I want her and the WTNH to follow mandated law now. I want it on paper. She says sorry, that's fine. I just want to know who influenced that. I want the people roles with that principal child defender in a fake conversations with me. I didn't respond to her with her confessions. She said there's a Lance Cuddy involved with it and some mayors. And these are also people involved with body dumping spots. And a fifth grade teacher I said had named Mr. Pruzzi is involved with a whole bunch of people next to a South Saviello and involved with a South Saviello, involved with a body dumping spot, a Billy Grouse, and other body dumping spots with state police families and people all along the Bronx Turnpike with them and all along Route 3 and Route 75 that have been planting interstates. That's why how there are proofs that they're trying to make it look there are planting evidences with people. There are proofs that people took pictures of me in Vermont with them in skiing because they're planting evidences. That's recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. They have federal evidences, crimes, methods with people in Vermont involved with further with the whiting forensics too, increasingly, and interstates with their formate with their treatments of groupings of like the racketeering influence uses of racketeering influence and corrupt organization act uses of Robert Luskin, the former standing chairperson on the racketeering influence and corrupt organization act. There are recorded remote uses of him in criminally foreign influence leading up to the World Trade Center attack long term in that context and sense. They have also been leveraging roles with the syntax of victims of all natures of organized all natures of crimes, including the World Trade Center attack, the state collusions with the wire crime acts and methods of the police departments involved with the same house slash S involved with wire crimes with them too, wire crime methods with them too, mail crime methods with them too, falsified police reports rolls too, and the difference of who's responsible for it rolls too motivations narrative because they have a whole bunch of different countries involved with them and uses of corners and exceptions also manifest uses of the witness protection and program involved uses of them their records they're putting real in databases they're putting fake with it and they're lying about their motivation because what's actually recorded shows tactically ulterior than they're pretending to where and how we could observe the torture, extortion, and fact human nature slavery rules our founders showed us to demonstrate are hyper evidentially recorded. And then, in other words, communicated, which is other than which is said. But they communicated for us to explain and understand how no one had free speech because everyone had to, take part with what you couldn't entertain and may give the right answer. There's a quality of fact human nature that's forced, so everyone had to behave in certain ways. Otherwise, they would be sensed by the breaching method, not collusions. That's why it was forced by a breach, but everyone was fact human nature enslaved, therefore physically. It is when you guys speak about the relativity of this to or non-relativity of it, whatever you think regarding it to what the impositions on the people of New York City, for example, which is sickly distinctly upon the people of suburbs, which were designed before America's founders were born tactically to nature to cause negative value nature progression, acts and natures, and people reliant upon resources and means from other locations. People are reliant upon simultaneously more and more a theater landscape that is incapable of doing anything but causing more and more negative value nature progressive acts and natures. Even like where and how the birds don't have worms walking out of the soil like they used to in the rain when all the bugs go away. There's not as many bugs there bugs where they could find. And they walk into bodies of water like, they have no fish in them anyway, but I'm saying that's where the nature system, we are using systems that speak about positive and negative the same way, but now our system's tactical ulterior. So all other ways that are only more and more in generation and more negative, even as positive. And self-value, justifications of it used to screen the breaching method. All we have to do is blame it on a breaching method and and appreciate law. In other words, you take someone and then you have them grow up in different spaces. It's going to totally change everything. There are people right on top of each other. In other words, Think you did, no, in other words, then everyone was gonna, in other words, everyone's gonna have problems and they're gonna settle them. What it comes down to is everyone's agreeing to self-value the quality of fact should be nature forced, which simultaneously can't defend itself and be what it needs to be to explain, to counter, to overcome the imposition of the natures of organized crime, acts and methods, fact should be nature oriented, juxtaposed, concentrated upon these locations, each, let alone New York City. All exceptions in exception nature, all natures of wealth were measured and maintained in our countries A through Z, not by the people who measure and maintain them alone. That's just part of where and how this breaching method knew once you have all locations, areas, and states, styles and natures of logic dependent on blaming other things, other selves, you know, for things that the breaching method caused. And you have that, in other words, you have increasingly things to duck behind because nature demonstrates a science as an increasing value. A breaching method has a scientific value that is only increasingly valued. The fact that a breaching method is an answer to the questions both nature and our own sciences asks, which is what was slavery about? Slavery was about a human factory nature breaching method that came from before modern religious messengers were even born. So we're going to have these things clear, but it's going to show. Time treatments at campuses, they obfuscate it. Oh, they take all this time. Oh, let's do this while we take all this time to say a little thing. And I tell, because we're trying to have fun. That's a certain type of, in other words, we have to have the law spoken for clearly and sanely. And the nature of debate contains quality aspects of nature that can't defend itself and afford but anything but. In other words, if they had phones back in the colonial times, or in other words, or early states, they're going to be using the same wire crime acts and methods because they already have roles with the same database identities of relativity to ourselves. Exploitation by the human factory nature breaching method singular, that which generated a whole bunch of negative value nature progressions, acts and natures as we could observe. And it propagated them. Relativity to nature, where nature would demonstrate them, propagated through what was designed needing to blame them on other things other than themselves, including industries, as identities of industries and their representatives, increasingly incapable of defending themselves and of affording the words of the law proper with convictions, as lawyers are not, with all reality descriptions, all names descriptions, all instances descriptions, all impositions descriptions, all criminally foreign influence descriptions have inseparable from them the value of this hyper criminally foreign influence method that is more probable and is more practical to theorize or convict with convictions about what causes these things. Like economics, pretending that anyone could get away with pretending. Our founders communicated not to leave out how the economics were employed, many ways more so by the breaching method than by themselves. And that's what the founders at the other countries communicated to be communicated to. But this breaching method knew that they wouldn't be able to do it. They would have to blame other things other than themselves. And then when nature would show them how to do it anyway, they would sabotage that and do. So one way, no one could speak for the value that each person has to discern what the others can't, especially where and how they're gonna speak. Like free speech spoke anywhere. There's an abridged. There were all those abridgments already entertained relative to calmness. All positive natures of positive treatments, negative treatments, neutralities, all relative for the breaching method, not relative to the identity of hyper simultaneous that comes with the hyperpantheism. The I'll donate counter tactically through modern countries. If you guys agree to do it in this way, and it will come through the big countries. Look how these big countries have problems with borders. It's relative to this breaching method of measuring and maintaining any grouping too. Everything, any and everything, good or bad, as long as they keep wherever the species body has a body standing, even if it's out of space, floating, criminal insidiousness, nature, quality of factory nature, quality aspects of nature that could exploit, because it already did. Again, nature itself demonstrates our systems having been a tactical terrier from its hypernative one. It demonstrates. Look where and how the language for Native Americans injunctive reliefs has failed. And when you observe this, look how the language for injunctive reliefs for colonists and for Americans has failed. See the veterans' homes, how they're built just like those cities, only allowed to unfold that way. More so by the breaching method than any natural limitations. Natural only as criminal insidiousness nature. The integrity of the law dictates that every identity of the law must make kids understand really young that criminal insidiousness and that predicate acts with facts were involved with slavery, were involved with that breaching method against Native Americans, and roles with it were roles with factory because they were factory nature enslaved. And the differences of the wealth is because this is a method that has enslaved too all natures of wealth relative to where people speak about it. Otherwise, they are sensed, even if it is an individual, even if it is a majority of people. We are in a semi-ancient trap that uses how we are value nature systems tactically ulterior from the only one as itself, and how it is being itself answers our questions that assigned A through Z. No other thing could be this without having negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, and demonstration of it. And of why and how the ancients were shown more probably and more practically to theorize or convict that the need to discern criminal insidiousness, but the needs to overcome it are tactical ulterior from those you could fathom, because what have you have been taught that has stayed, not just abridged, not just tactically abridged, but tactically / hyper tactically abridged. Because there are proofs of it, right? Okay, so in other words, we're going to examine this, but we need to who disbelieves. We need the who disbelieves that. For example, to help us, because we're in how we're going to examine wire crime action methods and mail crime action methods. But thank God we could show all natures of criminal all natures of criminals and interbranch and everything at the same time, collusions with worse, and time abuses of that, and how it was motivated, and we could stop it from happening. Shows that there are space slash existence means come out of nowhere, and they're going to be economic. They're not going to come through economic like that. These are economic systems that are semi completely criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw. So in other words, their language is not going to be unabridged. We're gonna admit that we're gonna come together as a human species body and do things that they couldn't fathom as anyone named through our system's tactical terror from this. When we move as a species body, right through all the things that have been blamed, we're all kinds of natures, logic, styles, needs, and nature rely upon other things, others ourselves, blamed. Instead of what really should be blamed, where nature is demonstrating negative value nature progressions, forcing blame. The course of things, vaccines, like these things.